Right, so we talked about images, and now it's time to talk about containers. So just to go back to this diagram again. Remember that we kind of have this image, and that's essentially the software that we downloaded. But the whole purpose of downloading that software was to do something with it. You know, the whole purpose of if you download a video game is to then double click on the video game and start playing with it. So it's the same thing, right? We downloaded this ghost image, but in order to run it, we want to build this container that's just another layer on top, and it's writable so that we can interact with the container. So in order to do something like that, let's go back to our terminal. And again, we type in Docker. And we can go to this top section. And previously we looked at image, but now we're going to be talking about container. So let's essentially do something similar. We'll type Docker container this time and see what we can do. So the main command that you'll be using with containers is how do you boot one up? And that's this run command. So this works the same way as before. Docker, this time it's container followed by the command. So we can do Docker container, and then it says run a command in a new container. After this, you need to type in the name of your image, right? Like Docker container run followed by the name of your image. So that's going to be ghost. And that's going to boot up our ghost image into a container. So it's essentially going to run the software. And you can see what it's doing, right, is that it's creating these tables and going through all these steps. Now, one other thing just to tell you is that, you know, before we did Docker container run followed by the name of the image, because this run command only applies to containers, so less times you'll just see people type in Docker run followed by the name of the image. So let's just do that. So type in Docker run ghost, and now this container is running. And remember, we could have like multiple containers, right? Multiple things running on our computer. Maybe we have our blog application running. Maybe we also wanted to have our chat application running. If you want to see a list of all the containers running, type Docker container again, and now this shows us our different commands. And look, we see this ls command. So do Docker container ls, and now this tells me, okay, this is different than us listing the images. This says, okay, we now have a container ID, so you can reference the container by this. Notice it's also given us a name. Beautiful. So we can reference our container by either the ID or the name. And also gives us some other information, like this container is running the ghost image. It tells us how long this thing has been running. It tells us what port the process in the container is running on. So that's 2368. If we want to stop this container, we can do Docker kill. Okay. I'm also looking for this, Docker stop. So you can do Docker, I'm not even sure what the difference is. So I guess you can just Google that. But let's do Docker stop. So either I could do the container ID, Docker stop, and type this. Let's see if that works. And now when it gives me that output of the ID, that's telling me it's probably worked. So we can confirm that by going over to the other tab here. And notice, look at this. It was running, and now it says Ghost is shutting down. Ghost has shut down. So what I'm pretty confident about is probably this stop goes through this process of giving it an opportunity, giving our container an opportunity to perform this shutdown process. Whereas if I did Docker kill, it would probably just not even give Ghost that opportunity. It would just directly kill the process, kill the container. That's one other thing to mention is you'll hear people describe containers as a process. And the reason why is it kind of goes back to the idea of the whole purpose, right, of this thing, of this image, of this container is to perform some sort of task, to perform a process. So here, the running process is boot up the website. So let's see that again. Here's Docker image ls. We can see that we have our image listed. Let's do Docker container ls. We can see there's no container, which makes sense, right? Because we stopped that running container. So if I want to boot this up, boot up my image into a container, I'll do docker run followed by the name of the image. Let's try the name of do the image ID instead. I said there are aliases, so here I'm proving that, right? I just copied this over and did docker run that. And now you can see it's taking all these steps. But remember, like, the purpose of these steps is to like have this task running. And the purpose of this task running is hopefully we could visit the website. So let's go to localhost 2368, and as you might remember, that's not going to work. So why does that not work? Well, if you think back to like how containers, a lot of what Docker is doing, right? It tries to keep these processes isolated. This way there's no conflict with one another. This way if my chat application is also using 2368, this thing will still be able to occupy its own port of 2368. So how does it accomplish that? Well, if you look at, this is really a whole virtual machine, but the idea is the same. You can think of it as running a port inside this virtual machine, inside this walled off container, okay? So the port is inside here, and it's port 2368 inside of the container. That's where it's running. So if I want to have my laptop listen in and connect to that port, I have to tell it to do so, all right? So the way that I do that is I can do, let's do docker container ls, let's list the containers, let's stop it, docker container, stop, and now I'll just type in the container ID. So this is shutting it down. So now let's do this again, right? Let's do docker run again, but this time let's try to connect the port in the container to my laptop, or a better way to put it is allow my laptop, the host, to listen in to what's going on in the container, just that one port. So the way I'll do this is I'll do the -p flag. So here I have to say docker run -p and say I want to have the host port connect to a specific port in the container. So I'll say let's have 8080 or 8999, just because I don't think that's occupied. Go to the port before, we can see was 2368, okay? Followed by the name of the name of the image, which is ghost. So the pattern is Docker. We could have put container here, but we decided not to. The command, then the flag, and then finally the image. And you're going to see that pattern a lot, where it's the command, the flag, and then finally the image. All right, so now we're going to try this again, and it tells me that it's running on 2368, but remember, that's the port inside here. The way I'm going to access it is by the port that is listening in on my laptop to 2368. So I'm going to go to localhost 8999, right? 8999 will connect me to 2368. So I'll go to 8999, and there is Ghost. So hopefully that now makes sense as to why we have to run this flag here, right? Because by default, all these processes are walled off inside the container. But in order to interact with it, we do docker run -p 8999. This port does not matter. I could have specified any open port on my computer. I just chose this one because I thought that it was open, and it is. And then you do the colon, and then you specify the container's port. So the port that I want to connect to in the container, which is 2368, followed by the name of the image, right? Cool. So that's it. Another way to shut down your container is just to press Control-C. You can see this is also going through that step. So just to review containers, to boot one up, we do docker run, right, followed by the name of the image. If we want to list all the running containers, we can do docker container ls. If we want to then maybe stop a particular container, we can do docker stop. Probably should be docker container stop, and then followed by the name of the container or the image, the container ID. And this is, we can see that return value. That's telling me this did work. So now I can go back here and we can see that it's shutting down. And then finally we saw that if we want to be able to expose a port in the container to my outside computer, the way to do this is to do that -p flag. And it's the host port, so that's 8889. I want that host port to listen in to the port on the container of 2368. And then it's going to kick off